My name is Zehavit Schenkolewski. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Education in Ashkelon Academic College. In my lecture today, I will address the experience of immigrant children in the period of Mandatory Palestine. Between 1928 and 1945, about 57,000 children up to age 16 immigrated to Mandatory Palestine. The working assumption of the Yishuv, the organized Jewish community, regarding immigrants in general and children in particular was that the newcomer has to adapt to the new situation on their own. The prevalent belief was that children endowed with special, unique emotional capabilities that allow them to adapt to a new environment, and consequently do not require assistance and support from the host society. Contrary to these assumptions, and perhaps precisely because of them, absorption was often a difficult experience for the immigrant children. This lecture sheds light on these children's hardships through their own life stories, as reflected in what they wrote for their school newspapers. The use of immigrant stories as a way to understand immigration process is a well-known and common method in immigration studies. Telling the stories allows immigrants to organize their memories and develop a new identity. The novelty of this lecture is my use of stories written by children in order to make their voice heard. The research is based on a dozen of compositions written by children and published in school newspaper. School newspapers were common in the first half of the 20th century. Many of their issues have survived and can be consulted today. They include composition by children on various topics. In many of them, the writers share their own experience with the readers. For this reason, those compositions express children's voice with almost no intervening filter. It is clear, of course, that the children's ambition underwent a process of selection and editing. Nevertheless, readers can distill authentic voice in them. I will not expand the discussions on the methodological issue of the composition reliability. To my opinion, children's voices uncover a reality that the adult world tend to ignore. Children's stories express a different truth that is no less important. The stories are rarely motivated by ideological or political interest, and though expose the world as it is. The importance of this study goes beyond its historical value, because, as we shall see, the immigration experience has a universal characteristics that remain relevant for the mass immigration to Europe or around the globe today. In the presentation accompanying this lecture, you can read examples from the testimonies on which I have relied. Because of the short time, I will not read most of them, but you can read them while I'm speaking. The children composition lead to a number of insights. First, about the experience of being uprooted. Children do not generally participate in the decision-making about leaving home. No one asks their opinion. Do they want to emigrate? Where do they want to go? Seeking to protect the children, adults often hide the circumstances that led them to decide to immigrate. The children are forced to live a world they know, where they often feel comfortable, and to abandon their friends and their social frameworks. But they do not understand why they must do so. This situation leads many to experience mourning, depression, and loss. The children has a complex relationship with the old homeland and with the new homeland. Because of the difficulty of leaving their home country and the trails that accompany the move, some of the children describe it as ideal, as a garden of Eden. Such a description comes even from compositions that describe a very violent experience at the homeland. The children has a complex of love and hate relationship with the home country they have left behind. They have equally a complex relationship with their new homeland. Naturally, and also in keeping with the society expectation, they develop a sense of belonging to the new homeland. But this feeling also exposes the conflict that accompanies the immigration process, because they see their love for their new country as a betrayal of the old homeland. Child immigrants are often refugees. They flee countries where there is economic hardship, war, and sometimes persecution. They have experienced harsh events and suffer post-traumatic symptoms. The society they joined has not had this experience. Even if they are aware of them, it does not understand their significance and sometimes ignore them. It is busy with the problems of society that absorb newcomers, concerned with the present rather than the past of the immigrants. Though there is a deep chasm between the observed and the absorbed. The post-traumatic experience are not addressed or treated in the new society. The children composition recount the atrocities they experienced and the harsh feeling that accompanied them. Often, the child immigrants must cope with a serious erosion of the family bond. This disruption impacts them heavily, complicated their daily functioning, and produce economic difficulties and emotional distress. During the period under discussion, father often immigrant to Palestine before the rest of the family, leaving them for months home without support or assistance. The children has to say goodbye to a loved one and felt the father's absence acutely. Some of the child immigrant to Palestine lacked immigrant certificates and had to enter the country illegally with their families. As might be expected, their accounts of sneaking across the border are full of fear and anxiety. Some traveled in crowded ships where they suffer from hunger and illness. Michael, a student at the Geva work village for children who made Aliyah on ship, bringing a refugee from Austria and Czechoslovakia in 1938, recalled that the clandestine immigration ship put back out to the sea and sailed away from the Palestine coast 4 times until it finally managed to reach the shore. During this long journey, 4 children died from illness, overcrowding, and hunger. When they finally reached Palestine, he wrote, "My only luggage was the license fleas that swarmed on the ships. I had lost 18 kilos. They also wrote about their first encounter with a new country. Immigrant children, and not only their parents, live between past and present. The societies that absorb them view itself as having saved them and expect them to see it that way too. The children need to integrate, foster the desire to bury the memory of the old culture and adopt the discourse that prevails in the new country. In this context, some of the child immigration to Palestine describe their aliyah in idealized and messianistic terms as a process of personal redemption. The euphoria that accompanied the arrival to the new country has soon shattered the children relate by the harsh reality of absorption. Many immigrants' families found themselves living hand to mouth. The parents were unable to provide their children with the economic security and were perceived as weak and impotent. Sometimes there was a reversal of roles in the family, and the children had to find a job to support the family. When they started their new school, the child immigrant felt strange and foreign. Their clothes, their behavior were different. They didn't know the language. They found themselves in a group that had already bonded and had to find their place among their classmates. Many child immigrants did to escape persecution in their countries of origin. However, the Palestine they reached was also washed with conflict and bloodshed. This situation struck them full in the face and shattered the illusion of security they had had when they disembarked, thinking themselves safe at last. Sometimes the violence they experienced in their new country triggered a new round of post-traumatic feelings. Immigrant children has to confront large educational gaps with respect to their classmates in the new country. Some of them have never attended a regular school because of the situation in the old home. The experience of education failure did not end when they arrived in Palestine. The gaps in their education, the difficulty of learning a new language, and the emotional challenges that accompany the immigration experience also detract from their achievement in school. The trails of social and educational absorption were in major reason the many immigrants' children dropped out of school. Baruch wrote as follows: I was in a bad way in those days. I was lazy, and the teachers called me and said, "Speak Hebrew. It is forbidden to speak Yiddish." But back then, I was deficient in Hebrew, and that kept from communicating with friends. All those days, I would spend the afternoon in the streets, and the children of the marketplace were my faithful friends, more faithful than the school children who made fun of my dress, my language, and my laziness. During the Mandat period, in fact, thousands of children lived in the streets, went to work, and sometimes fell into crime. Baruch's story exposed the absorbing society insensibility to the immigrant children's distress. The adults focus on learning Hebrew as an essential part of integrating. They were oblivious to the complexity of the immigration experience. Israel Itrai bitterly summarized the helplessness he felt among the adults and his difficulty to communicate in communicating with them and asking them for help. I wanted to ask the adult, perhaps they could provide an answer to my problems, but the pain was so great that I couldn't get a word out of my mouth. This sentence maybe is the best summary of the main insight from the study of immigrant children's compositions. To conclude, it is generally thought that the young children are more adaptable than adults, so the immigration experience is easier. But listening to the children's voice when they write about their immigration expose the deep scars they bear and the heavy price they pay. They paint the adult world as insufficiently sensitive to their troubles and as failing to take account of the diverse needs that the absorbing society must take in order for their immigrant children to integrate successfully. As a first step, these children should have been allowed to describe their experience directly, whether in composition, creative writing, or free artistic expression, thereby making it possible to provide a response better suited to the individual need of each immigrant child. Moreover, educational system cannot be satisfied with providing a learning solution and by helping to acquire language. Immigrant children need extensive mental assistance to deal with the difficult experience they had during the immigration process and with a feeling of grief and loss. The absorbing society must show patience and openness to their different culture and educate their children to accept the newcomers. Perhaps above all, however, various channels must be developed through which immigrant children can express themselves, and though enable open channels of communication between adults and immigrant children. Thank you.